Hi, everybody. Welcome to our live stream ahead of the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. Terry, Zach, and I have been bantering all morning, getting you ready for this race this weekend. We had a lot of excitement in Miami. We used the limitless chip, Zach and I did. It worked out great, and now we get to calm down a little bit. But Zach, I'm looking at your social media this morning, and you might have some big decisions ahead of you again this week.
Yeah, I know. I can't really get away with a lot of the stuff going on this weekend because of my decision to go full on budget building. It's put me in a tight position where I now have to lose a bit more points to take either a -10 or a -20. And I can tell you right now, I haven't decided. I'm definitely will be taking at least a -10, but will I be taking a -20 as well? Because it's one of those weekends, isn't it? Low overtaking. Can Esteban Ocon even get up to 4 points? It's risky. It is. And if I get that 0.6 million, all of that budget will be for nothing.
And Terry, you've made it into the top 3,000 in the Global League. Are you feeling comfortable this week? Feeling a little bit nervous? Where's your head at?
I'm just going to retire now. Just bow out gracefully. And that's it. Not play the game. I'm going to be one of those people who don't touch it now for the rest of the season and just see where it goes. No, I'm joking. I see Hakon's worried I'm going to do the griddy. I've actually been practicing. No, I haven't. That's a lie. No, I mean, I haven't had a lot of movement this week on my team. It's been quite a straightforward couple of transfers, really. There's not a lot going on with it. So I've already posted it. So there's some spoilers there. But it's one of those where I think we just, after the excitement of Miami and what happened and the unpredictability of it, I think this weekend's looking like I don't want to say straightforward because it's Formula One, but a normal race weekend, I should say, currently.
Got a lot of our friends already loaded up in the chat today. Good morning, Ahmed. Thanks for waiting. We had a few people waiting this morning before we came on, which is fantastic. Hey, Matt, looking forward to the stream with you today as well. Brian's on. I already saw the lineup for BZ earlier, so we'll be reviewing that in just a little while. And of course, Hakan, who always gives Terry a good shout every episode, is here too. So perhaps, guys, we can start with just a review of Free Practice 3. It's been an interesting few sessions here. Pirelli have introduced the C6 compound to try to get a little bit of a different tire strategy. But as we saw in FP3, so many drivers were struggling with it that I don't think it's going to be on the menu for anyone in the race, but it could lead to some people using different tire strategies, even in qualifying, to avoid using the C6 when it counts the most. So looking here, we've got Lando and Oscar have basically just been volleying 1-2 finishes in each of the free practice sessions. It looks like they'll clearly be at the top of the pile this week. Max Verstappen closing out the podium positions here. Another strong weekend for Max. His record at this circuit has been impeccable. P1s all the way through. And then Kimi Antonelli in a home race looking really good for Mercedes as well. I think the top 10 driver that stood out for me was George Russell, finishing as low as he did. He seemed really uncomfortable throughout the session. Wondering if either he was experimenting with something or if he was struggling with those softs. But for those of us running Mercedes as our second constructor, we really need him to hit this weekend. Is there anyone that stands out to you in the top 10 before we pan down to the bottom?
Do you want me to? Do you want to go, Zach? Which one?
Yeah, go for it, Terry. Go for it.
Well, for me, I think George is definitely experimenting. Kimi's got a different setup on it. I think George was running a sim setup, which clearly wasn't doing what he wanted it to do. We've seen that from Mercedes in the past. It's not uncommon to see that where they've tried to do something overnight in the sim and then brought it to the track and it's gone completely opposite way. I'd fully expect him to revert back towards the setup that Kimi had. Kimi yesterday didn't really show a lot in terms of stringing a whole lap together. He seemed to do parts of a lap and not really have one good run. So today, I think we're seeing a true sort of pace from him where he's more settled into it. Obviously, the weekend, big weekend for him. No Toto there. So I think there's a lot of pressure on him, and by not having Toto there to deflect some of it as well is probably playing on his mind a bit as well in terms of the pressure. But for me, like you say about the tyres, I think we're going to go to a one-stop again. It was introduced to make the race a two-stop race. I don't think we're going to see a two-stop race. I think we're going to see a one-stop race again. And I think the C6, we might be seeing the first and only appearance of it this season if there's anything to go by. Didn't we have this a couple of years back with the C0 or something like that? There was a tyre, wasn't it, last year, or C1, whichever it was, where it got introduced once in testing or something, and we never saw it for the whole season. I think the C6 might be going that way.
Absolutely. And you make a great point about the presence of Total Wolf just sort of leveling things for Kimi Antonelli. It's a home race for him. He's brought his whole class as a field trip to the circuit earlier in the weekend. Toto usually, even when he's not on site, he has that button and he can just remote in from wherever he is. But I think he's truly away from the team this weekend, out in LA for something. I saw he had a pep talk video to George and Kimi at the beginning of the weekend. And so it looks like he's not going to have that leadership presence for Mercedes. So it's going to be on the rest of the team to really make sure Kimi's head is screwed on tight. And then he has a good weekend in front of the home crowd.
Yeah, it's a bit unusual. He's at his son's graduation. So he's apparently talking. He said via WhatsApp. That's obviously a sponsorship plug. But he's talking to Bradley via WhatsApp. But he's not talking to the drivers direct. So normally he has that direct link to the drivers, like you say, with that button and that remote pit wall he has. He's got none of that. He's literally got like timing screens and probably an F1 TV subscription and a WhatsApp. So yeah, welcome to the real world, Toto.
And then just as we go down to the bottom of the grid here, we have the same few drivers that have been struggling throughout all of the sessions, particularly both Haas's, both Sauber's, Colapinto as he gets used to the Alpine for his first week. Yuki Tsunoda was struggling in free practice 3, but not really so much in the other free practice sessions. So I'm not too worried about him. But it looks like we'll have the usual bottom 5 out in Q1, unless somebody tries something crazy with the C6 compound and finds themselves on the wrong end of a Q1 exit.
Should we be worried about what Red Bull would do to the back of Yuki's car with that angle grinder for the first part of free practice? Look at where he is. Maybe they need to angle grind it back off and put some else back on. Because whatever they angle grinded back on didn't seem to work, did it?
Zach, actually, this is a good lead into our friend Radio Paddock's question, Red Bull or Mercedes for a constructor? Because Terry and I are pretty firm on what we're leaning toward this week, but I know you're on the fence. Where are you leaning now?
Well, I think I'm a little bit more worried about the whole Yuki Tsunoda in 17th thing. And it is just because at Imola, the main thing as a constructor before anything else, because if Verstappen came first, it'd be great. Red Bull would get a few points from that as a constructor. However, if Yuki's sitting in 15th, 14th, then Mercedes would still be able to beat them. And that's where my head is right now. And I think I was liking it from the thinking Verstappen could put something magical in there. But with Yuki being a bit of an unknown, I think I will just be playing it safe, going Mercedes. I wish I could have gone Red Bull for a bit of a differential, but yeah, I don't have too much faith in Yuki after seeing what he did after that.
I agree. I think what we're going to have is Max and then George and Kimi and then a little bit of a drop to Yuki. So unless Red Bull can make it up either with some shocking pit stop points, which have been that good at this year, or a shock Q2 exit for one of the Mercedes drivers, I think Mercedes is going to get them this week. This is around the part of the show where I recommend you all like this video, because once we get to our usual number of 50 likes, we'll start reviewing your lineups and answering some more of your specific questions too. Where should we go to next? Let's go to the betting lines, because there's been a little bit of movement throughout the weekend. Oscar and Lando have just been volleying the P1 and P2 finishes in each session and also alternating in terms of their line. So that just tells me that even though Oscar Piastri's won 3 races in a row, Lando can show up and be the fastest on any given weekend. So if you have the extra budget, if you want the differential, Lando as a 2X driver isn't crazy. And then also, of course, both Williams drivers in the bottom of the top 10 here, showing that Williams is for real as a top 5 constructor.
Interesting odds on, was it Charles Leclerc up there? I thought that was a bit ambitious.
Yeah, for how clueless Ferrari look now, it's definitely, definitely generous.
That felt probably a bit harsh on Lewis, that one did.
One thing that stood out to me too is that we saw Aston Martin flying in FP1 with their new floor. And when we get into the tech upgrade article in a little while with Terry, he's going to walk us through some of the changes that Aston Martin have brought this weekend. But despite that, they still have Lance Stroll effectively going out in Q1, being in the bottom 5 for the Grand Prix. So for those of you considering Stroll versus Albon, this is the first bean on the scale for Alex Albon.
It's going to be tight, I think, between Albon and not obviously. I think everyone knows I'm team Stroll at the minute. But how bad would it be if after all of this, again, sort of like the Alonso and Lawson situation, Stroll and Albon go and crash into each other, so it doesn't even matter yet.
Oh, you said it now.
I know. I don't even want to put that in the universe. Zach, there's a question from Ahmed in the chat. You see Esteban Ocon all the way down here. You had mentioned at the top of the show it would take a -10 to get him out. Sounds like he might be in the same situation too. Where's your head at in terms of pulling Ocon out to take that penalty, and who would you put in his place?
So my thinking about this is quite clear. So I've said if you have over 112.8 million, you would be able to bring in, if you got rid of Esteban Ocon, both Albon and Stroll into your team with Hadjar and Colapinto and McLaren and Mercedes. So if you can do that, it's 100% worth the -10 or even the -20 it would take to get to there. The issue I have is I'm 0.6 million off of that. And what I would take is a -20 overall to get another -10 of Ocon down to Bortoletto. And realistically, I still think Esteban Ocon can get to that -0.2. And then it comes down to a simple question of, is it worth -10 points to get an extra 0.2 million in maintained budget? Or are the points more useful? And I think just for 0.2 million, I think 10 points is better.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think we're going to have a lot of questions this week about 10 points versus 0.2 or 0.3 million when we look at the different options. That's how close the game is this year. We have a lot of viable teams, people using Williams as a second constructor. We've gotten a lot of questions about Sauber as a second constructor because they're at the price floor. So I think we'll have some really creative lineups facing us in a few minutes. Guys, a question in the chat I'm seeing in a few places, recommendations to use some of the remaining chips. For no negative, obviously Miami was a fantastic opportunity because you could correctly predict a lot of DNFs. Although it was interesting because it wasn't due to the rain, a lot of those issues there. So last year it was Brazil in the pouring rain that was the best time to use no negative in 2024. Ultimately, just find a weekend where things look uneasy. Usually that's due to weather, usually sprint weekends because you have 3 events for drivers to lose points. That's a safe time. So the perfect storm, if you will, is a wet sprint weekend. But if not, once you get to the second third or the last third of the season, just finding a wet weekend. And then for autopilot, I would wait until you have enough cost cap to run 2 front runners where anyone could be the best 2X driver.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be like that for a lot of the chips. Realistically, I think it happened quite similar last year as well, where no negative, like we mentioned, yeah, rain craziness, you want to get in on that. But limitless used right at the start of the season, it's quite mayhem because sometimes, yeah, you get the no negative as well. So there's quite a few chips in the first 5-6 Grand Prix weekends, but then we have quite a bit of a drought. I don't think we'll be seeing any big chips like extra DRS until definitely not Spa. I don't think it'd probably be around Kota, wouldn't it? Looking around Kota or Brazil time.
Yeah.
See, we got some more friends that have joined us. Hey, Mike. Hey, Stickman. Welcome aboard. Got a lot of lineup decisions ahead of us here. Let's check out the budget builder from F1 Fantasy Tools just so we can get a sense of where some of our decisions are coming from this weekend. What's very interesting here is that of the B tier drivers, only Colapinto, Albon, and Stroll are likely to gain value. So then Bortoletto most likely will stay at the price floor. Everyone else needs a little bit of good luck and a little overperformance to get any price gain, whereas many top options are slated to lose. So I think this is what we're up against, is how do we preserve budget after some of the disasters that hit us in Miami? And a lot of those decisions are going to be with that question in mind.
Yeah, I don't really know exactly what it's going to work, because one DNF will absolutely ruin every single person's Grand Prix weekend. And just looking at those percentages as well, the odds, it is just still crazy to me how, looking at Tsunoda, looking at Sainz, looking at Ocon, these sorts of people, we're just praying that they get a -0.2. I can't believe it's got to that point, but that's what we're doing. And even still, when we're talking about how good Albon or Stroll could be, I mean, yeah, just Albon and Stroll, they're the big two. We're talking about just 0.2 million up. I would be very surprised if anyone of the B tier drivers got a 0.6. And I mean, how would you get that in Imola? It wouldn't be from overtakes. It would be if Albon got a top 5 finish, right?
It would have to be something incredible, and driver of the day, just some sort of buffer that you wouldn't expect from them. So
Adam,
Terry, Hakon wants to know in the chat what Aston Martin did with their upgrades and explain like I'm 5. So maybe we can head over to the tech corner.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
And in the meantime, if you haven't liked the video already, please be sure to do that, because once we get out of the upgrade report from Terry, it might be a good time to start diving into some of these lineups. We got to get those likes first.
Yeah, so this is probably the first tech update that's got literally every single team's on it. So normally I pick 4 or 5. I decided to change the format and go for absolutely all of the updates on there so that you can see exactly what's going on. So you see here McLaren, it's all around the back of the car. It's all around the rear corner, the rear wing. So the rear corner is basically around by the rear brake ducts and leads into the diffuser and the rear wing area. So that's what it means by rear corner. You will sometimes see front corner, it means the front part of the car, rear means the rear of the car. Technically, it means all of it, but it doesn't in the sense of when they introduce them around the beam wing and the other bits, they're separate. So it basically means around the sort of brake ducts area and around the rear suspension on that one.
I like your tagline here. McLaren,
yeah.
all about the rear end. That could be on the first Fantasy Formula shirts we make this year.
And I can't click on the cute ladies on the right because it's Adam.
I was wondering when you're going to get to that.
This is just an eBay link, everybody. This is not an indication of my search history.
Adam didn't clear his browsing history before we come on live.
Get out of here.
Brilliant. And kind of fitted with McLaren's rear end, didn't it? But there you go. Right, so we talk about Ferrari. Ferrari don't know what they're doing. I tried to make it as nice as I could in that one, but ultimately Ferrari are bringing real subtle tweaks because they've shelved everything, unfortunately, at the moment because they don't know what they're doing with the suspension development of the SF25. So in the nicest possible way, they brought tweaks to a car without bringing anything major. Red Bull have been on this sort of evolution, is probably the best way to describe it. They've been doing it step by step, week by week, where they've been changing bits around it, making little tweaks, making sure it works, bringing them part by part rather than one big update. So this is the next one, that one. Mercedes is all around the front wing. Now, when we're seeing front wing, I think this is a precursor of Barcelona. So I think we're seeing teams starting to experiment with their front wings post Barcelona and post obviously the new technical directive that's coming in. So we're seeing, suspension fairings there, front wing, the engine covers just do cooling, but there's a few teams who have made front wing adjustments. Now, I said this before, when you do it on there, you don't always have to run it on the car for the race itself. You can literally just put it, you can just bring it and try it out. Some of the teams might be doing that. So just because it's listed on here doesn't mean it's definitely on the car, which is one to remember on that one.
That's exactly what I was wondering about Aston Martin. They looked so fast in FP1, but then Lance Stroll he fell off a little bit in FP2 and FP3, and I couldn't tell if that was a test of this floor or if it was just a drop in performance as he tried other things.
Yeah, so going on to the comment about explaining like a 5-year-old, basically they've introduced a whole new floor is the best way to describe it. So you got floor body, floor flares. The whole floor on the Aston Martin is brand new. In essence, what they did with Lance Stroll's car, Lance had the updates to start off with, and Fernando didn't. However, Fernando has now got them on the car, so whatever they saw, they obviously quite liked from Aston Martin's point of view. So they would have tweaked it in FP2, which would have explained some of Lance's performance difference on it. But ultimately, they liked what they saw and put it onto Fernando's car as well for the rest of the weekend. And then Alpine, again, it's a very slight tweak with just the front wing. Makes you think it's Barcelona aimed at. Nothing else really on that one. And Haas was probably their biggest update of, I'm thinking back, I think it was one of the American races a few years ago when they brought a massive update. That's probably Haas's biggest one since then. It's a huge update on pretty much everything to do with the floor and everything on the rear of the car. So that's one to watch out for, see what that does. And again, Racing Bulls was more a slight change to the floor body, just some tweaks on it. They've actually brought some updates all the way through. So again, they're doing a little often on that one. And yeah, nothing for Williams and Sauber. So as I said in the summary there, the floors are where we're seeing it all. In this European leg, we expected these updates. The floor is where you're going to get the most gains from. That's where everyone's trying to redirect it. So yeah, for me, I think, McLaren haven't made a step backwards with theirs. Aston Martin looks like they've made a step forward. But ultimately, I'm not sure that the others have brought enough to close the gap on McLaren at the front yet.
Yeah, the biggest upgrade for Alpine this weekend is probably Franco Colapinto.
Well, maybe we haven't got through race weekend yet.
How are we looking in terms of likes? Where should I go next?
We're on 55. We've hit the 50 likes threshold. Thank you,
All right,
everyone.
let's fire it up. Perfect. All right. This is our friend Faint. Just want to add the Williams lineup plan ahead of Monaco, where Tsunoda, Albon, Gasly may become good options. Okay. So the lineup previously had double Haas. Now Faint's looking at Russell Williams with Stroll, or a -20 for Albon, Stroll, Mercedes. Oh boy.
See, I would say I genuinely think the -20 is worth it if you can get, because I've labeled that the dream team. That is genuinely Albon and Stroll, the best two, with Colapinto the must-have, and then and Hadjar's looking good this weekend as well. I'd take a -20.
I'll take it -20 on that.
I'm fine with it too, but if this is their original team, couldn't you have Doohan here? I mean, Colapinto here and someone else, maybe a Salbert driver, and then you can do that with 2 transfers? How do we get to so many moves that it's -20?
Yeah, true. If
it
was,
that's what I mean.
So Faint, if you're still out there, let us know if this is the team you started with, or if this is a different option that you're considering for no penalty. Because I would definitely take a penalty if you're saddled with double Haas, but let us know if there's something we're missing there. All right, WD Richie, welcome aboard. You're brand new here, debating on getting out of Mercedes and either gambling on Red Bull and Max. I use Limitless in Miami. I love the idea of Williams bringing cost cap gains.
It's hard, isn't it? Because if we're talking Red Bull and Max is going to be in the mix. Because we know he turns the car down in free practices. We know that he's going to be in amongst it, and that I think he's proven that with what he's got. But it's again that Yuki one. Will Yuki score enough points to offset? Yeah, what Max is going to get compared to 2 Mercedes ones, who, when you look at Ferrari's performance, you'd have to say take Max out of the equation, you'd have to say that Mercedes were the biggest sort of challenges. If you take Max out of the equation, I know you can't really take him out of the equation, but you know what I mean? Yeah, he's an anomaly, I think, in the sense of it's just Max and he's just an amazing driver. So I think for me still, that's why I keep leaning towards Mercedes. I think that for those two, I just think that Yuki's still not showing me anything that makes me want to take that plump. I know it'll be different. I know potentially if something happens and he scores well, yes, it's going to be a good gain as such on the points side of things and the league side of things, but it is risky either way, isn't it, really?
And just to foreshadow a little bit, I think you'll find that I quite like the lineup in the middle for the reasons Terry said. I think Mercedes is a bit safer than Red Bull this weekend. And then you're also getting a piece of Albon, who will be competing for a top 10 finish, Colapinto, who's at the price floor and could get you up to a 0.6 million gain. And then Hadjar's the most run asset in the game right now, so he might not gain value. He might have a tough race, but also a lot of us are going to go down with you if that's the case, because so many teams do have him. Zach, do you have a thought on which of these teams you prefer?
Yeah, so on that, first of all, on the poll, Mercedes versus Red Bull, 89% think Mercedes would be a better option than Red Bull straight away. So I think I would in agreement that the McLaren and Mercedes would be the way to go. And it's one of those things where I think I've got like a threshold. It's a bit wishy-washy, but around 105, 106 million. If you have less budget than that, then I would recommend still budget building with the Piastri, McLaren, Williams. However, from looking at it, I believe if you can afford to have Piastri, Antonelli, McLaren, Williams, I think you might be over that. So then I'd recommend just doing Piastri, McLaren, Mercedes.
Yeah, because that means you're so close to potentially a Piastri, Antonelli, McLaren, Mercedes build if you keep building just a little bit more and surviving these few weeks.
And you've just got to remember, it's, again, like we mentioned earlier with the budget gains, Mercedes to Williams is only a 0.3 difference in budget. And especially around Imola, where the points might be quite a big gap between the B tier constructors and the A tier constructors, it could really hit you points wise. And I don't think that's worth a 0.3 million increase.
This next lineup is from Luca. Thinking about this lineup and taking a -10 to get Mercedes in, budget blocks me from getting any better between Alonso and Hulk.
I'd probably take that. Look at it. I don't think that's a bad one to get a Mercedes in for -10.
This seems fine. I think I would just need to see what Luca had before this. Like if taking the -10 to get Mercedes in meant they previously had Williams or someone here, I think this team falls into that lower budget window Zach mentioned a moment ago, where maybe you do keep pounding those cost cap builds. But on balance, I like this team. Between Piastri, McLaren, and Mercedes, you'll get plenty of points. Cost cap gains from Colapinto, potentially Hulk. Cost cap stability from Bortoletto, and then everybody has Hadjar. So seems safe enough.
Yeah, I like that.
Adam, just to answer your question on Team 1, Michael's put in the chat, it was Michael, and I think, did I see Triple Haas he had there? I just saw something just pop out. Original team had Triple Haas. So going back to your...
Okay, so it
one.
was a different team.
Yeah,
okay, that wasn't the original team. So I'm with all of you then. That -20 makes the most sense for me this week. I don't often recommend a -20, but you probably use your wild card chasing cost cap like the rest of us earlier in the season, so I'm good with it. So Carlos's team now, I think this is going to be one of the more popular flavors of the week. Piastri, McLaren, Mercedes, and then do you go with Stroll or Albon? That might be budget dependent. Carlos has gone with Stroll this week. Perfectly fine. Budget drivers at the back here. Any thoughts on this?
No, like I say, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of that. We've just that Stroll and Albon changeover. I think seems to be the most common teams on team put out there at the moment.
Yeah, I think I've said, I'm Team Stroll, but you ask everyone, it will be 50-50 who says Albon, who says Stroll. And right now, this poll has just started, but it's 70% Albon to 30% Stroll. So actually, it's a little more for Albon.
There was some great research from our friend Rob about the first 7 races in the careers of Lance Stroll and Alex Albon. Alex has a DNF in the first 7 races in every single year of his career. And this is race number 7, and he hasn't had one yet. Lance Stroll has had one in all of the first 7 or 8 of his career. So basically, they're both due for a DNF. It's a matter of whether or not we dodge the bullet on the right one at the right time.
Hold on, I'm just changing my team.
All right, here's our friend Brian. BZ's lineups. Let's see. Team number 1 looks totally normal, totally fine. Hulkenberg in instead of his teammate, probably chasing a little bit of that cost cap for Hulkenberg. And then team 2, a Russell and Haas. Interesting.
Oh.
Now, I'd be careful with team number 2 and Haas. Now, Brian had mentioned earlier that these teams aren't locked in, but Haas needs, let's go back to the budget builder.
I believe it was 19, wasn't it? 19 points?
Right. It's 19 points, and they've only done that twice this year. So it's not a sure thing. And you can see across the percentages here, decent shout that they gain value, but also they could fall short if Ocon can't get out of the bottom 5, as we've seen in the free practice sessions. So an interesting alternative. We need Russell to figure out whatever plagued him in Q3 as well. I would have liked Russell in the top 3 or 4, and then Q3 gave me just a little bit of pause. I'm sorry, FP3 gave me a little bit of pause.
Yeah, Team 2's annoying that Haas, obviously with Behrman, got that penalty, because that would be another one where, especially if you still had Limitless, could be a play if Haas were involved. But with them not involved, yeah, I just don't think it's doable this weekend.
All right. A handle named after Terry's favorite dance here. We're going to hit the gritty next. This is an Albon Red Bull team. I think this is another popular option. We've talked about the pros and cons of Red Bull this weekend. It looks like, according to the poll, everyone's favoring Albon over Stroll. So I like this team as a differential, but I'm personally leaning a little bit more toward Mercedes this week.
Is Red Bull popular? Because after FP2 sims, it seemed really popular, didn't it? I know FP3 sims are out. I've seen that in there. I just wondered if Red Bull was as popular now on the sims as what they were.
Let's go back and refresh, because they weren't out when we started the stream. Let's do a
it's definitely what was pushing me to Red Bull.
So a little bit of a differential down.
There you go, see.
They were on 50. No, the points have stayed the same, yeah.
Yeah.
For
I
Red
was
Bull.
wondering, 'cause I know that my team on there was pushing me towards Red Bull. It was trying to, after FP2. So I just wondered if that's why a lot of it we're seeing a lot more of it.
As for the Albon Stroll debate, 8.6 for Albon, and then all the way down here, 0.5 for Lance Stroll. So another bean on the scale for Alex Albon. All right, I'm going to hit refresh, just make sure no new lineups have come in. We got a few here. All right, we've got Jan Mar. Original was Piastri, McLaren. Oh, Piastri, Russell, McLaren, Haas. So that was a cool team. And then we haven't talked about the triple McLaren Sauber option. We've gone off on it a bit during the week. So the intrigue about Sauber is that they're at the price floor and they can't lose any value. If they get any points at all, they'll gain 0.6 million. So they could be a cost cap friendly team. And basically the difference between Sauber and Mercedes this week is 45, 50 points or so. And they're wondering if Lando Norris could potentially fill that gap. To me, I think the only way this team is viable is if you use autopilot or move that 2x to Lando to at least make it interesting. Otherwise, I think you're getting about 0.3 million more in cost cap than the rest of us, with a bit more risk with these back markers that could DNF.
Yeah, and I've quickly got up the stats for Japan because I like coming back to this stat, especially for this Grand Prix weekend, because I think it's going to be quite similar points-wise, just to show why, again, I just don't think it's good for the points. So in Japan, Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull all scored more than 40-plus points as a constructor. And then the drivers, Verstappen got 36, but then Norris and Piastri only got 27 and 24. So at low overtake tracks, even if Norris, Piastri, one of them has a great weekend, it's still not going to cover the points you lose from not having a Mercedes, which is why I just don't think it's worth using this at the minute.
Yeah, you need a bit of a fastest lap and driver of the day with a top three position all stacked on top of each other for one of them to stand out. So it could be a challenging week for this lineup. As much as I prefer Albon over... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I've seen people asking as well, how do they submit their teams?
Oh, wonderful. Download the FanAmp app if you haven't already. The fantasy formula is one of the first bases you'll see when you're there. And then there is a team submissions page, and you can just take a screenshot of your team, drop it there, and our producer will put it on a slide for us. Love taking more lineup options. Speaking of lineups, we're at the bottom of the hour and we haven't revealed any of our teams yet. So I'll kick things off, refresh my Twitter here. Did my lineup post? All right, it did. But will it load? There we go. So it's the old faithful lineup that we shared earlier in the week. Piastri, McLaren, Mercedes with Albon, bringing Colapinto, of course. And I think this is going to be a gauge of how many engaged players are left in the game. I don't think there's going to be too many people trying to forage for cost cap that would ignore Colapinto. So this will be an interesting ownership rate for this week. And Terry, I think this is going to be a familiar lineup for you too.
Copy and paste, yeah, copy and paste.
I cheat off of the best tests, everybody.
Yeah, I've decided to just put the same team as Adam because that works ahead of him. I'm not actually playing the game anymore. I'm just gonna
He's just gonna cover me off so he can say
all the way to the end of the season. Yeah, all the way through. A couple of questions in here which seem quite interesting. So Joel's made a really good point about the poll where he's put Albon versus Stroll is skewed to who's the better driver rather than who's most likely to guarantee the 0.2 in budget. Absolutely valid point there. Another one about talking about Albon and Stroll, but not Sainz.
I think the issue with Sainz
is it because he needs a lot more, doesn't he, than Albon, if I remember rightly?
It was that 0 that's got him in some trouble. So now you can see most likely to lose some value. But if he hangs around, P7, P8, where he's been, he could get that 0.2 million.
Leapfrogs has just dropped that he's putting Stroll over Albon. So I think that's what was Zach's.
It's confirmed. It's confirmed.
The number one player in the world from last year puts a big bean on the scale for Stroll.
Yes.
Could have said that before we locked in the lineup. Come on, play the game. Don't drop it in after for a live stream when we've all submitted them. No, I'm joking.
Thanks a lot, Andrew, for checking in. I think that's meaningful. I think a lot of people are in between Albon and Stroll. I think on this show we're split between Albon and Stroll. So. Ooh. Zach, where are you at with your team now? Are you in a position to reveal yet, or do you still have some thinking to do?
I'm just about to post it. I think I've decided what to do. I think, yeah.
Well,
It's
why don't
posted.
we do picks while Zach has a minute then? Because we haven't done picks yet, have we?
Sure. Yeah, we can come over here to
let's do
our
that and give
picks.
Zach 5 minutes on that one.
Because if you're in the FanAmp app submitting your lineups, be sure to pick your FanAmp qualifying and Grand Prix picks for this week. I think I snuck out ahead of Terry in the first 6 races, so now we'll see if Terry can get back on even footing in the picks for the next 6. So who qualifies P1 through P3? We've all picked flavors of McLaren and Max Verstappen, with Zach boldly picking Max at P1. So it gives you a little insight into how confident he is in Red Bull this week. Fastest back marker, Q1 time. Terry and I have picked V-Carb. Zach must have liked what he saw to Pierre Gasly.
I will admit I put that in before of seeing FP3 time.
before the rabbit message them time
Yeah.
the noise and wreck the air floor.
Which Mercedes driver has the better session? We all picked Russell. Again, that was before Q3 where Antonelli looked a bit faster. And then
can we go back?
Sorry, everybody. I've got no faith in Franco in his qualifying debut. I think he's still just getting used to the car, getting used to a tricky circuit. I say he's out in Q1, but Terry and Zach say out in Q2. And then how many different teams make it into the top 5 in qualifying? I think it could be 4. I'm not going to say which 4.
And just remember, there are prizes for picks, isn't there, as well? Not
absolutely, yeah. So there are prizes for a winner each week, every 6 races, which we call a sector on the app. There's prizes for sector winners and then the overall season winner. So lots of opportunities to win prizes, even if you have a couple of tough races in a row. We're turning back over to 0 points, so everybody's on even footing here.
Ooh, chat's hot.
Did I stall long enough for your team?
Yeah.
All right, let's search for Zach.
As soon as Zach's seen them, we come to these questions because it's hotting up in the chat.
Look what we have
I've
here.
Decided.
He is back on the stroller coaster. Stroll, Ocon with McLaren and Mercedes. So we've got you to back off of Red Bull, keeping Esteban Ocon to try to get just a little nibble at 0.2 million if he has a good weekend, and then Lance Stroll with the endorsement from last year's P1, Andrew.
Well, it's something Leapfrog was saying in the chat, and I do agree that that's sort of what swayed me as well, where he's talking about next weekend in Monaco getting Stroll and Gasly, which looks better than Albon and Gasly for budget increases coming into Monaco, which then either means, because basically I can tell you my gist of it is Ocon, no matter what happens, will be able to do swap for swap for Ocon to Gasly, even if he gets that minus 0.6. And then I could either sit out my team just like that and then get to free transfers, which I've been dying for all season with all of these negative points we've been taking. Or if anything goes wrong, like a Stroll crashes or a Hajar crashes, I have that extra of a transfer to move over there instead of having to worry about Albon. So that's where my head's at.
Fantastic. All right, let's head back over to lineups. Make sure we didn't miss anybody. Okay, this next team looking to take that minus 0.2 in budget instead of subbing Ocon. Also looks like it could be similar to what Zach had just mentioned a moment ago. Green team is no doing allowed for so hoping for the worst. Oh, okay. So it looks like this might be a lowest scoring team possible.
So like that team is actually I've got one with my team 3 as well with this guy. We're trying to see who can score the least amount in an F1 fantasy. And I will say I still had Jack Doohan in my team, but he said I'm not allowed to use him as a ×2.
This is a very I like this team. I can't wait to see what the results are of your head-to-head lowest point score. And then this is exactly what you have.
I feel we need a feature on the lowest scoring team. I feel we need to keep track of this now and see how it's going. I feel like it's a whole new world we haven't looked at.
All right, I'm going to refresh one more time, make sure we're not missing any more. I know a few people are trying to get in. All right, this next one is maybe starting with double Haas, and then it's just a matter of which option you go to for here. It looks like Terry and I have been going with Albon, Zach, and Andrew going with Lance Stroll. We had talked about the pros and cons earlier. Albon, a little bit more of a shout for points this week, but Stroll on a path for more price gain cumulatively between Imola and Monaco. Let's see. Well, this next lineup, 111.5 million. So good budget, up by where Zach is.
Yeah, this is quite interesting because I've just seen they've got Limitless as well. So this is where we could see McLaren Sauber team being worthwhile. I'm just trying to think. Out of those three, for the Limitless play in Monaco, I think I do like Team 3.
Yeah.
But I would recommend, even if it takes a -10, because I have more faith in Colapinto, potentially instead of Bortoletto, have Colapinto in that Team 3.
Yeah, because in that case, you're trying to build cost cap across 2 weeks, and I think that's the point where the -10 is definitely worth it. All right, we'll come back over here so everybody can see the latest cost cap odds. Let's get back into the chat. Is there anything we're missing?
Just checking as well, is that the updated one as well?
I believe someone hit refresh just to make sure.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's
please.
sweet.
Comment in the chat, if Stroll decides to be Senna this week, I'm wheezing hard. AF. Me too. Yeah, if Stroll goes beast mode, we'll be hearing it from Zach next weekend.
Yeah, we've seen what you can do in the wet, and it's not 100% off the cards that it's a wet race tomorrow.
Oh my goodness. Ahmed wants to know how much Stroll has paid you, Zach. He's got the money to do it for sure. If they can buy Adrian Newey, they can easily buy Zach, I think.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be that expensive.
The green team, we're seeing now in the chat, got a whopping -48 last race week. -40 of which were additional transfers. So technically a -8 on balance. But on a sprint weekend, that's pretty impressive. Patron wants to know, Zach, if you had wild card, would you choose Albon anyway? But it sounds like no transfers in the world would have you pick Albon over Stroll, considering the cost.
Yeah, I just think if it was one of those things, because it would only be one extra transfer, I wouldn't do the wild card as well, because then you'd be wild carding. Realistically, a wild card should only be used when you're having to take a -20, and we would come to Monaco, and in that situation, it wouldn't have to be a -20.
Ben's asked this a couple of times, are you worried about Ocon being P20 in all practices?
I hope he is. Honestly, that would be the dream scenario. Because then no matter what happens, unless he doesn't DNF, if we do get some crashes, perfect.
It's an interesting point because they've changed the circuit a bit in 2024 to introduce more of these gravel traps. We saw a few drivers, particularly Isaac Hadjar, back in FP2 go off. If you just put a little too much of your tire on there, you could spin out and we could have some DNF. So those back markers, if they survive it, a few drivers ahead of them do DNF, that's where your Ocons will start gaining some value.
So I'm just going through some of these.
Ooh, Hakan wants to know, with 24.2 million, which 3 drivers would you get?
I've seen. Oh.
I'd have to do that.
I don't trust Hulkenberg enough this weekend. I know he's one of the ones where it's safe for the -0.2, most likely, but I just don't see him getting 5 points to get that +0.2. So then it's the case of I just prefer Bortoletto just for the safety.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I can see as well, someone's asking in the chat for the best team for 113.2. And for me, it would be the having both Stroll and Albon with Hadjar, Colapinto, Piastri, McLaren, Mercedes.
Yeah.
Basically the best of everything. Yeah.
That means you're really close to 4 Tier A's too.
Yeah, if you get both, then go for it. Oh, I'm thinking I'm going to go Russell Williams over Mercedes and Bortoletto. Any thoughts?
Oh.
Trying to do this math quickly in my head.
A little worried with the FP3 results for Russell. But again, Williams could put in a bit of a surprise. Budget-wise, they're good as well. I don't know, though. I think it's too risky for a normal race weekend.
It's interesting, the gap here, about 17 points between Mercedes and Williams. Russell's at 17.7. You can't possibly imagine Bortoletto's going to get very much. So basically, the question's because they're on equal points and you could get a little bit more cost cap out of Williams. For me, I like sticking with McLaren and Mercedes because that's going to give me one less transfer I know I'm going to have to make for Monaco because I want those two teams for Monaco. So that's the difference. Yes, now we are at the point in F1 fantasy season where Piastri, McLaren, Mercedes are set and forget most weeks. But I think we're going to see some teams play Norris from time to time, especially if he stamps it on pole today and wins tomorrow. He'll be back on the menu for some teams for sure. Let's see, what other questions do we have here?
We've got a bit more about Sainz again. Just Sainz needs too many points to get that 0.2 million, which is why I don't think we like him.
Yeah, it's not a. We think Albon's going to perform a lot better than Carlos. Far from it. It's purely numbers on this one. Going back to that point you said earlier about drivers and abilities, it's all about the budget here. Albon's much more likely to gain than Carlos is in terms of the budget.
I'll tell you, he loses budget again this week. He could definitely be on the menu for these next few races. He's been performing too well to not be run as much as he has been. I think at the beginning of the year, we saw Sainz's initial Williams price said, ooh, I think there's a little bit of Ferrari price baked into there. But then after so many consecutive weeks of dropping value, I think he's going to fall right into our clutches soon. He's at 9.5 now. That's looking pretty good.
Yeah.
Something I am interested to see as well is if Colapinto can get those 6 points to go up the 0.6 million. Because right now, potentially not. Maybe not. I don't think so. If I'm worrying about, to be fair, yeah, if I'm worrying about Albon not getting them, I'm definitely worried about Colapinto not getting it.
Yeah, for sure. Those teams that are in between, taking a -10 for Colapinto, especially if you have someone like a Hadjar or Bortoletto, maybe I'd just let it roll this week.
So this one's the interesting one. So Thomas put Red Bull v Mercedes, pros and cons for both of them. For me, the Red Bull one's quite simple. It's Yuki's performance and picking up those second points. I think they'll still be consistent in the pit stops. I think that Max will still get you a really good clutch of points. Although Max isn't normally a popular driver of the day winner, is he? Despite we've seen some dominant Max performances, haven't we? Not sitting at driver of the day. So I think for me, Mercedes still holds up. Both drivers going to consistently score more, and their pit stops have actually been a lot better this season compared to the past couple of seasons as well. So I think that's why I go with them. The cons are, of course, I think that Max will finish higher than the Mercedes drivers. So, you got to weigh that one up, haven't you, as well? If Max storms and wins by a margin, then actually you might get it on that one. So
I think Max has only posted victories at Imola. So
yeah.
I think that's the biggest pro is that if he runs off and wins the race, as long as Yuki finishes somewhere between P10 and P12, that's going to look pretty good for the Red Bull constructor. The problem is McLaren are so mighty, it's going to be hard for him to do it. They're stronger than any opponent has looked in the last 3 years against Max. So it's not going to be an easy win for him.
Yeah, and if you see some of the Sims, I think you posted as well, Adam, didn't you? With actually McLaren look like they haven't turned everything up as well. Still, again, it looks like they've firmly got the sandbags on board still. And I even saw someone talk about the Miami style lead that they enjoyed could come back to roost this weekend as well, despite teams bringing updates as well.
Yeah, Formula Data Analysis had posted some data about ideal lap time. If you stitch together the best Sector 1, Sector 2, and Sector 3 times of the McLarens, they're 0.6 up on Verstappen. So that leads you to believe that maybe they're just picking and choosing when to lay off a little bit or trying some strategies that make them look a little slower than they really are. So I like McLaren a lot.
I've seen in the chat as well, Ahmed brings up a good point, which I've not really been thinking about because I've been thinking about more potentially Antonelli or one of the McLarens getting it. But he's mentioned Colapinto potential driver of the day, which I haven't even thought of. But if that happened, that would be very detrimental to anyone who has the Piastri, Norris, McLaren, Sauber teams setting up for Limitless.
It's a possibility. I mean, the Franco fan base is certainly one of the most vocal out there, isn't it? So I wouldn't certainly bet against that. It's a really good point that I hadn't thought of, actually. All he needs is that coupled with, potentially a good finish, even in the points somewhere. Beats Pierre potentially.
And think back to the FanAmp
picks.
picks. The two of you picked Colapinto to make it into Q2, so then you're just a DNF or two away from being on the fringe of points.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean.
I'm trying to see the percentage for Colapinto, and on F1 Fantasy Tools, it's still only 0.7% chance they think of him getting driver of the day. But
Really?
I think it could be a little bit higher than that.
It's absolutely really good point, actually.
Miguel wants to know Stroll or Alonso. I'd say Stroll because the car is still pretty much a tractor, but at least Stroll can gain some value. Poor Alonso still got a DNF on his.
Yeah,
on
I mean
his
he's well down in terms of points, isn't
he? Yeah, Stroll. Sorry, my bad. Alonso would need 16 points to just not get 17 points. I mean, 17 points to not get a minus 0.6 is not happening.
Don't go Alonso, no.
There was some debate earlier this week that Alonso could finish the season with negative fantasy points. He's up to like negative 30. On a good race, he's getting 4 or 5 points. He has 1 or 2 more DNFs because of just reliability between now and the end of the season. And we could have a legend finishing with negative fantasy points.
Isn't this his worst start to the season since the GP2 McLaren Honda days as well? I read somewhere as well. In terms of just overall performance, it's like up there with those days. Obviously, giving Adrian all that wind tunnel time.
That's the only good news. Is that, the farther back you finish in the constructors title, the more wind tunnel time you're going to get for next year.
I mean, he seems awfully happy about it, doesn't he? For somebody who's not finishing those points.
So someone's asked in the chat as well, JB, which I've then gone on to F1 Fantasy to check what sort of team would look like. And another sort of thing I haven't thought about. He's put Norris better than Piastri this race, ? And I've gone in to make a team, and you can afford, if you have Bortoletto and Colapinto with Stroll, most teams could afford Norris, McLaren, Mercedes. It's not really been on my cards this weekend, but Norris actually could be usable.
Everyone's locked in the Oscar one, haven't they, to be fair?
Yeah. I think I'm still on Piastri, but it could be a differential play.
I think for me, I just want to see one good week with Lando to prove that he's back. I think with momentum, Lando can be pretty mighty. But the last few races, he's had a moment here or there, either in qualifying or in the race, that makes it feel like his teammates got a step ahead of him. But if all Lando needs to do is just grab one race, and then I think that confidence is back and we can trust him as our 2X driver.
Yeah, I mean, I feel we're at a real crossroads with the 2 McLaren drivers. I think whoever comes out of this European run of races in the lead is where McLaren's going to switch their focus to in terms of the Drivers' Championship. So I think the pressure is really on Lando to try and get ahead, like you say. But I think also with regards to what we're seeing so far, I don't see Oscar putting that much wrong, if I'm honest. Yeah, I quite he's cool, he's calm, he's collected. And I still think he's close enough to Lando to still take the fight to him. So, yeah.
Terry, I'm going to analyze this lineup while you pronounce what this user's name is. I like the team on the left. the team on the right is putting a lot of faith in Albon. We talked about. I'm nervous about Albon and Williams because God forbid that first DNF of the season comes through. This team is pretty devastated. So I would at least switch Albon to Stroll if you were going to run Williams. But for me, I like the team on the left a bit better.
I'm still not going to try to pronounce that. That sounds like some brakes on the BMX or something, doesn't it? Shimano. Something.
Oh my goodness. All right, so now Jonas wants to know couple of different Mercedes lineups and then variations of Williams drivers.
Definitely team 1's off the cards. Just you can't have a driver set getting a minus 0.6 for me. I think it's too wasteful on the budget. Especially with a lot of teams, like we've mentioned, close to that Antonelli, Piastri, McLaren, Mercedes. Or, hey, like we've mentioned now, if Norris could start getting some form, people close to doing the Norris, McLaren, Mercedes teams, you'd fall a bit too far behind if you were messing about with Behrman. So, and the same with Gasly, to be fair. So I think it'd have to be team 2 for me.
For the record, I like transitioning from team 2 to team 3 for Monaco. That could work.
Yeah.
Who in the house has the same question we all have is Red Bull versus Mercedes this week. You can see all three of us have preferred Mercedes, but if you trust Verstappen's record at this circuit, I can totally see using Red Bull as a differential, because if Max posts at P1, Red Bull will inevitably outscore Mercedes.
Yep.
Right. Silva wants to know original versus taking a -20. For me, I would probably just stick with team one with the alterations of Doohan to Colapinto, and then Behrman to sort of whoever you can afford with the rest of that budget. Looks like you can get into either your pick of Albon or Stroll. We've got just 5 minutes left, so make sure you lock those teams in if you haven't already.
Oh wow, yeah, that's gone really quick. Yeah, just team 2 with the Williams. But again, it would again depend on the team budget that we're talking about. Because if you had a less than 105, then actually I would quite like the look of team 2. But if it's anything more than that, you can't be missing out on those Mercedes points.
Agreed. Let's make sure no new lineups in these last few minutes. Ooh, Ricardo's in. Should I take a -10 for this? Ricardo, if you had Mercedes down here earlier, I wouldn't take a -10 for this, but I do like the cost cap builds through the rest of the team. So if you had a different construction, like if you had Haas before, I'd be fine with this.
My thinking is potentially, Ricardo, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm assuming you might have had triple Haas before. And if you had that, then I would take the -10 to get over to this.
Yeah.
Zach, back in the chat, Lannister wanted to know if you recommend Albon and an Ocon out for -10, but you had this exact question on your team and opted to keep with Ocon, right?
Well, that's the thing. For this scenario, I actually would take the -10 to get to Albon. The reason I didn't do it is because I was 0.6 off affording Albon. So I would have to do it for Bortoletto. And so my head is thinking Ocon to Albon potentially is a 0.4 million budget difference. So I think that 10 negative points would be worth it. But Ocon to Bortoletto would be a -10 for 0.2 million, which I don't think is worth it.
I think that covers off Max in the chat as well.
Got to make sure, definitely confirm teams as well.
Yes, make sure you lock your teams in.
They're all
Jay Champion. Ooh, look at this. Verstappen, Piastri, Sauber. So this is the triple McLaren build, but with the variant of Verstappen as a 2X driver. That's a differential for sure.
That's bold. I like it.
That's Terry levels of bold.
Absolutely. I like it. Go for it. Lock it in.
Might be laughing at us.
And then let us know how you get on next week.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Gentlemen, any final thoughts before we run off to qualifying?
No DNFs, please. That's literally it, please.
Yeah, just keep it safe. We had enough excitement with Miami a few weeks ago. I'd like a nice, easy race for F1 Fantasy.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see it on points rather than DNF points. I think they hurt too much, don't they, for people? So yeah, definitely.
Thank you all so very much for watching. Enjoy qualifying and enjoy the race tomorrow. We'll be back to preview Monaco early next week, and then we'll be right back here, same time next Saturday for our live stream ahead of the Monaco Grand Prix. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll see you soon.